5 tiny fingers curled around Eleanor's wrist, and she looked down to see 2 round blue eyes, their dark lashes casting shadows over rosy cheeks. Eleanor knew the look on her son's face. She knew the pressure of his grip, the quiver of his chin, and the tenseness of his small frame. "Not to worry, little one," she whispered, smoothing away his dark curls. "We are almost home." "Home?" Arthur asked. "Yes, home. The place where we can be safe and happy." Safe and happy. Eleanor drew a shuddering breath as their coach rolled over the path that passed through Worthing, a town she knew to be just 10 miles from Brighton. Brighton was home. "Are Papa and Grandpapa home?" Arthur stared out the window at the unfamiliar land, the distant ocean, the smooth, predictable landscape, and the manicured vegetation. Sunlight touched everything from the rooftops of houses with flowers sprouting from their gardens to the curve of Arthur's cheeks. He had hardly known anything but rocky ground, prickly moors, dark stormy skies, and fierce wind. "No, no," Eleanor said. "We need never see Papa and Grandpapa again." She wrapped her arm around Arthur's shoulders, and he slid down in his seat, resting his head in her lap. She swallowed, closing her eyes. Her legs shook, and she hoped Arthur couldn't feel it. He could never know that she was afraid too. "You will meet your Uncle Adam." Eleanor's voice broke with her brother's name. Arthur turned his face up to hers, hesitant, uncertain. "Adam is kind, just like my father was." She blinked hard. Arthur had never seen her cry, and he never would. A beacon of strength was more comforting than reassuring words and promises. She couldn't imagine what her father must have been feeling when he died, knowing that he would never see his daughter again. Adam had written to her, saying that her father had succumbed to his illness shortly after she had been taken to Scotland, shortly after Mr. Quinton had forced her to marry him and forced her to write lies in her letters home to her family. "I am safe," she had said. "I am happy. I love Mr. Quinton." How could she love the man that had torn her from her life in Brighton, torn her from the protection and care of her brother and dying father? The thought that she had once loved Mr. Quinton sent disbelief scratching over her heart. If what she had once felt for Mr. Quinton was love, then she wanted no part of it. Love deceived, destroyed, and hurt everything in its path. Her heart had blinded her to what Mr. Quinton truly was all along, a monster in disguise. Her father had seen his true nature, but she had not believed him until it was too late. She forced air in and out of her lungs, slow and steady. Mr. Quinton could not hurt her and Arthur again. He was dead. Her late husband's father, the elder Mr. Quinton, however, was not. Eleanor began humming the song she often sang to Arthur in the silence of night and in the early hours of the morning. "Sing, Mamma," he said. She brushed her fingers through his hair as she sang in a quiet voice. "Hush, rest your head. The rain will end. The cracks will mend. The clouds will part. Rest, aching hearts. Hush, close your eyes. The sun will rise. The robin sings of happy things, of days ahead. Hush, fall asleep. The past will keep. Let future reap a spring to hold, a joy like gold." As she sang, Arthur visibly relaxed, his hands loosening on her wrist, his eyelids fluttering closed. They had been travelling for 7 days, staying at various inns between Northumberland and Brighton. Eleanor counted the hours of travel as steps toward freedom, but she still could not banish the feeling that she was being followed, chased. Her throat grew dry and her hands shook. The coach continued on as Arthur slept on her lap. She checked the coins in her reticule, hoping she had what she needed to pay the coachman. She had brought all the money she had on her journey home, and she feared it would not be enough. The uneven road turned Eleanor's stomach to knots, but Arthur's heavy breathing told her that he was still asleep. Summer rain began falling heavily, splashing on the windows in large droplets. In the distance, down the plush hill from the dirt path, Eleanor could see a small estate. It was 2 stories tall, with browned butter stone, large windows, manicured gardens, and beautiful oak doors. She stared at the house, slightly blurred past sheets of rain. Standing firm and alone amid a storm, the house felt very much like a beacon of its own, a beacon of strength and hope. With a lurch, the coach suddenly stopped. It teetered off balance for a brief second, and Eleanor clutched Arthur to keep him from falling off the seat. The horses brayed, and the coach slid to the left before falling completely still. Eleanor straightened in alarm, her gaze darting out the window. Had highwaymen stopped their coach? In the light of day? Her heart hammered. Or had her late husband's father, the elder Mr. Quinton, discovered his son, motionless and dead, and come to find her and Arthur? "Mamma?" His little voice sounded more curious than afraid. "Are we home?" She put a finger to her lips, craning her neck out the window again. Just as she did, the coach door flew open. She stifled a shriek, pulling Arthur to her chest. Fully expecting to see the robust figure of the elder Mr. Quinton, or even a masked highwayman, she was relieved to see the extremely slender form and bold head of their hired coachman, Mr. Fiffett. Rain dripped down his face, catching in the sparse dark moustache above his lip. "My apologies, ma'am, but I'm afraid we've fallen upon a spot of mud. 'Twill take but a short moment to be on our way." She swallowed past her dry throat so she could speak. Misty air blew into the coach, sending shivers over her arms. She tugged at her gloves. "That is no problem at all." Considering what her imagination had conjured about their sudden halting, she was quite relieved to hear that it was only the result of a little mud. Mr. Fiffett shifted, his boots sinking into the mud as well. "I'm afraid I must ask that you and your boy step outside for a moment while I push the coach out of the mud. I doubt I could budge it with the weight of the both of you." She eyed his slender arms, agreeing wholeheartedly with his assessment. "Oh!" Eleanor glanced at the pouring rain again. "Yes, of course." She lifted her bonnet off her black curls, setting it atop Arthur's head. The wide brim would protect him well from the rain. It was the width of his shoulders, at least. She took the coachman's hand, stepping down to the ground before reaching inside to pick up Arthur. He wrapped his arms around her neck, tipping his head up to look at the storm. She followed his gaze to the charcoal clouds, where they twisted in the sky, wringing out moisture like a wet cloth. The moment she stepped away from the coach, warm rain plummeted down, soaking through her hair and dress. Her feet sank into the mud as she walked several steps back. She blinked against the water in her eyes. "'Twill take a short moment, that is all," the coachman half shouted over the pounding rain. He slogged around to the other side of the coach, examining each wheel to find the one that was stuck. "I believe it is this one here," Eleanor said, pointing at the nearest wheel, the front right, buried deep in unrelenting mud. "Ah, yes." To Eleanor's surprise, Mr. Fiffett dropped to his knees with a splash, rolling up his sleeves to his knobbed elbows. He dug around the wheel with his fingertips, picking up minuscule amounts of mud. At this rate, it would not take a short moment. She continued standing in the rain, holding Arthur close. The thought of him catching a cold terrified her. The last time he had fallen ill, he had narrowly survived. The bonnet shielded his head well from the rain, but his clothing was soaked, and the air grew colder by the minute. She felt as if she were still in Northumberland. There had been many occasions that she had confined herself to the house to avoid rain such as this. She had to remind herself that she was not there any longer, not afraid, not trapped, and certainly not weak. "Sir, please allow me to help you." The coachman lifted his head. What could only have been a mixture of rain and sweat poured down his red face. He hesitated. "Oh, no, ma'am, I mustn't employ a lady's assistance." "I am already soaked, sir. I would like to help so I may take my son out of this weather as soon as possible." She held his gaze. When he didn't react, she set Arthur down several feet away and marched to the back of the coach. She took hold of the back corner and dug her feet into the mud as she pushed with all the energy she possessed. She heaved her body weight forward, her arms shaking with exertion, as she tried to budge the coach. It didn't move. She walked around to the coachman, who stared at her as if she had descended from another world. He held a scant handful of mud in each palm. "Perhaps I might try digging, and you push?" she suggested. He nodded. When he stood, she saw that the entirety of his knee breeches were covered in mud, his arms the same, all the way up to the elbows. She swallowed, picking up her skirts with one hand as she bent over the wheel. She sunk her hands into the wet earth, making a sliding and scooping motion to free an armful of mud. Working quickly, she created a ditch around the wheel, as well as a slope in front of it, so the horses could easily pull the wheel up and forward. The horses shifted, sending a splash of mud toward her face. She blinked hard against the water and mud that now dripped down her cheeks and eyelids. "May I be of assistance?" Another voice came from behind, a deep baritone, a voice that made the coachman's sound quite childish in comparison. Eleanor turned, glancing up to see the man who had spoken. He appeared to have addressed the coachman, but he stared down at Eleanor with concern, a set of piercing blue eyes meeting hers through sheets of heavy rain. He looked familiar, though she could not quite place him. His clothing, too, was soaked, water dripping off the brim of his hat. He extended one hand toward her, and she took it hesitantly. The man pulled her to her feet, taking in her appearance with steady flicks of his gaze. His eyes flashed with recognition. "Miss Claridge." She drew a quick breath as she studied the man's face in closer proximity. How did he know her? He did look very familiar. As she took in his blue eyes and golden blonde hair, she determined that he could only be the younger Beaumont son, a family she had grown up near in Brighton. What was Mr. Beaumont doing in Worthing? She had been briefly acquainted with Lord Ramsbury, the eldest Beaumont son, 5 years before. She could vaguely recall meeting this man as well. There was no mistaking the intensity of both men's gazes, the striking blue and the inarguable attention. Before she could respond, Mr. Beaumont shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over her head and shoulders. She gripped the lapels, grateful for the shield from the rain. She stepped back to Arthur's side. He clung to her skirts. With Mr. Beaumont's help, the coach was free within a minute, rolling past the deep mud to much more steady ground. Eleanor's arms shook from the recent exertion of digging, and Arthur trembled in the cold beside her. "I thank you most ardently, good sir." Mr. Fiffett shook Mr. Beaumont's hand before turning back toward Eleanor. "Shall we be on our way?" She picked up her skirts with one hand, the weight of the water and mud that had soaked through, causing them to drag on the ground. Arthur grasped her other hand as they walked back toward the coach. She paused beside Mr. Beaumont, handing his jacket back to him. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. She could only imagine what Mr. Beaumont thought of her. When she had disappeared 5 years before, the entire town of Brighton had likely been curious as to her whereabouts. Then she had written to her father, telling him of her elopement, and her reputation had surely crumbled. More likely than not, Mr. Beaumont was thinking all sorts of disdainful things about her. She stood, uncomfortable under his study. The rain had softened to a trickle, the clouds parting above them. The timing was impeccable. "Is it really you, Miss Claridge?" Mr. Beaumont asked. "Or, my apologies, what shall I call you now?" He was referring to her married name, the name she would now always bear, a reminder of the wicked man she had once loved. "Mrs. Quinton," she said. She wanted to say more, but fear stopped the words in her throat. What would Mr. Beaumont do if he learned her husband was dead and she was fleeing from her home in the north? He took her hand and helped her into the coach, lifting Arthur in beside her. Mr. Beaumont's expression was all curiosity and concern. "Is this your son?" "Yes," she said. "And what shall I call him?" "Arthur." A smile crossed Mr. Beaumont's face for the first time, a gentle upturn of his lips. "How great it is to meet you, Arthur." Eleanor cast her gaze down to her son, who had nestled his face into her arm, hiding from Mr. Beaumont's view. "He is shy, that is all," she said, though it was not entirely true. Arthur had every reason to fear unfamiliar men, even those that should have been most safe, secure, and trustworthy, had given him great cause to fear, his father and grandfather most of all. Mr. Beaumont crossed his arms, glancing at the coachman, who had reclaimed his seat, before returning his gaze back to Eleanor. "Are you bound for Brighton?" She nodded. Would he not let them leave? She was quite uncomfortable and wet, and her stomach had begun squeezing with pangs of hunger, and she hated to see Arthur suffer, as wet and cold as he was. She needed to get him to Brighton quickly, where he could warm up by a fire. "That is still 10 miles away," Mr. Beaumont said. "Precisely." Eleanor wished to remain polite, but her patience was running thin. "Yes, so we must be on our way." "You intend to travel for another hour in your current state?" He shook his head. "I admire your resilience, Mrs. Quinton." A soft smile. "My estate is just there, beyond the hill. I insist that you and your son come for a short time to change into warm, dry clothing and eat before taking the remainder of your trip." Eleanor followed his gaze out to the house she had noticed before the coach had gotten stuck. Free from the rain, the lines and curves of the house came into clear focus. She met Mr. Beaumont's eyes, and the pleading there, combined with Arthur's shivering, gave her little choice in the matter. "Very well, that is very kind of you." He nodded, walking toward the front of the coach. He offered Mr. Fiffett the same courtesy, to which he heartily agreed. Mr. Beaumont stepped into the coach, taking a seat across from Eleanor and Arthur, closing the door behind him. The coach began rolling forward before turning around, heading back in the direction of Mr. Beaumont's estate. Eleanor kept her gaze fixed on her lap, stroking her fingertips over Arthur's hair. She stole a glance at his face, where his eyes lay fixed on Mr. Beaumont. "Are you visiting your brother in Brighton?" the baritone voice asked. Eleanor glanced up. "Yes." Another pang of grief struck her as she thought of her father, and how she would never see him again. The grief was muddled with guilt over the pain she must have caused him by leaving with Mr. Quinton. She tried to assure herself that the fault was not her own, but the assurances she gave herself always became lost in the harsh, drunken tones of her late husband's voice. She pressed away the sounds that haunted her mind, focusing on the man in front of her. Could Mr. Beaumont be trusted? She pulled Arthur closer. Mr. Beaumont gave another of his small smiles, the expression still mingled with deep curiosity. "When were you last in Brighton?" Her fingers twitched on her skirts. 5 years ago." 5 years? His voice remained polite and respectful, but carried a tone of disbelief. Has your brother not been acquainted with Arthur? Your boy cannot be older than 4. No. Her breathing had increased in rate, but she tried to appear nonchalant. I have been living near the border of Scotland. It is quite a long journey back to Brighton. She could not possibly tell Mr. Beaumont that the only reason she had not come fleeing back long ago was because her husband would not allow it. But he could not stop her now, and that was the only reason she was on this coach. Her heart pounded, and she closed her eyes against a surge of nausea and unpleasant memories. When she opened her eyes again, she found Mr. Beaumont watching her carefully. He had the most curious stare she had ever encountered. She ought to have been uncomfortable with his intense study, but there was nothing menacing about it, nothing unsettling or chilling. He simply watched her as if he was afraid she would faint or shrink or disappear at any moment. She dearly hoped he had no more questions for her. "Why did your husband not accompany you?" he asked. "How could he send his wife and son on such a long journey alone, and on a hired coach no less?" Blast the man for all his questions. She exhaled sharply, smoothing her palm over Arthur's arm. In her youth, she had been taught that honesty was a virtue to always uphold, no matter the circumstances. Her father had been an advocate of honesty and always spoke freely. But telling the truth now would result in unfathomable consequences. How great of lengths was she willing to take to protect Arthur? A lie danced on the tip of her tongue, and she had little choice but to set it free. "My husband was deterred with business, sir. He was so kind as to allow Arthur and I to take a trip while he was away, so we would not be bored at home in his absence." She hoped Arthur did not fully understand her words. She knew his shy nature to be enough to keep him from contradicting her, but she did not want to teach him that lying was acceptable, at least not under normal circumstances. She and Arthur's circumstances, of course, were far from normal. Mr. Beaumont gave a small nod. "I see. Aside from the recent storm, have your travels been comfortable?" "Yes, quite." "I am glad to hear that." She heard the smile in his voice, warm and strangely comforting. She had forgotten what a kind voice sounded like. She did not have to cringe when she heard his inhale as he drew air into his lungs to fuel his next statement. She did not have to cover Arthur's ears against angry shouting and unholy words. She knew Henry Beaumont to be a respectable man, at least by his reputation. His brother, Lord Ramsbury, had been a notorious flirt, and had even flirted with Eleanor on more than one occasion. She had never taken it seriously. She was glad to pretend she was still married, if only to thwart unwelcome attention from gentlemen. If Henry Beaumont was anything like his older brother, then she was happy to lie and tell him her husband was alive. She wanted nothing to do with men ever again. The only man she could trust was her brother Adam. The coachman led the horses down a narrow stone path, one that led directly to Mr. Beaumont's front property. Eleanor paused to admire the house again, taking in the beauty of the architecture and cleanliness of the grounds. She almost sighed. She had missed the southern coast of England. The neat, orderly, and predictable environment brought her more comfort than anything else. She felt as if she were finally in control of something again. Now all she had to do was endure her meal with Mr. Beaumont, and she would be one step closer to home. Chapter 2. When the coach stopped in the drive, Mr. Beaumont helped Eleanor and Arthur down. The coachman followed as they were led toward the front steps. The sky still held a hint of grey, but the storm had almost completely cleared, and the earth smelled fresh and cleansed, as if the sky had just granted it a new beginning. The grass was soggy and pliant beneath her boots. She could not possibly become wetter than she already was, so she didn't mind it. As they walked through the front doors, the housekeeper, butler, and 2 footmen stood at attention. "What a lovely home you have," Mr. Fiffett said, his voice echoing under the lofty ceiling of the entry hall. Mr. Beaumont thanked him before instructing the footman to fetch Eleanor's things from the coach. She had managed to fit both hers and Arthur's possessions into one small trunk. She hoped she hadn't forgotten anything of great importance in her hurry to leave Northumberland. Mr. Beaumont turned toward Eleanor, ushering a young maid forward. She curtsied. "Mary will show you a guest room, where she will help you and Arthur change into dry clothing," Mr. Beaumont said. "I will ask my cook to prepare a meal immediately." Eleanor's stomach grumbled in answer to his words, quiet enough to escape Mr. Beaumont's notice, but not Arthur's. He grinned up at her. "I'm hungry too, Mamma." She smiled. "Mr. Beaumont has been very kind to provide us with a meal." Arthur looked up at their host, eyeing him with scepticism. His smile faded even as Mr. Beaumont gave him a broad grin. The footman returned with Eleanor's trunk, and she took Arthur's hand as they followed the young maid, Mary, up the stairs. Eleanor tried not to let her muddy skirts drag on the fine marble. It had been so long since she had been in such a lovely house. She swept her gaze over her surroundings, in awe over the fine architecture and decoration of the home. Mary worked quickly, washing and brushing through Eleanor's tangled, muddy hair. She did the same for Arthur. After they were changed into dry, warm clothing, they met Mr. Beaumont downstairs, where he had started a fire in the drawing-room. Mr. Beaumont offered Eleanor and Arthur each their own comfortable chair, and she sat down. Eleanor sighed as the warmth that radiated from the flames absorbed moisture off her face and hair. So enjoyable was the sensation that she nearly forgot that Mr. Beaumont still sat beside her and Arthur, watching her with the same unabashed curiosity as before. "Are you feeling well?" he asked when she met his eyes. "Much better." He smiled, the warmth emitting from the expression almost greater than the warmth from the fire. Eleanor sat back in her chair, sudden emotion clawing at her throat. How had she been away from kindness for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be a recipient of it? Arthur sat forward on his chair, extending his hands toward the flames to warm them. She did not know where Mr. Fiffett had gone, but she wished he were in the room. Perhaps then Mr. Beaumont would not direct all of his attention at her. "You have a beautiful home," she said. "When did you move away from Brighton?" Mr. Beaumont leaned his elbows on his knees, staring into the flames, much like Arthur was doing. "When my father died 4 years ago, he was kind enough to leave me this estate. He left the estate in Brighton, as well as the earldom, to my elder brother, as expected." A slight smile tugged on his lips. "He did threaten to disinherit my brother and hand over everything to me, but after seeing the effort my brother put forward to keep it, I am quite pleased with this arrangement." Eleanor knew the brother he spoke of. "Your brother is Lord Ramsbury." She did not have a high opinion of the man. She once had, but that was before she married Mr. Quinton, a close friend of Lord Ramsbury's. What did it say about one's character to be friends with such a despicable man? "He has taken on my father's title now, Lord Coventry, though I simply call him Edward." Mr. Beaumont smiled again, a twinkling that reached his eyes. Eleanor could see a stark resemblance between the brothers, in their eyes, golden blonde hair, and broad stature. But Mr. Beaumont's countenance was softer somehow, more genuine and youthful, especially with the shadows and highlights of the nearby fire reflecting off his features. She noted the smoothness of his brow and cheek, finished with a solid jaw and straight nose. He had a remarkably handsome face, but above all, it was a kind face, and that was what made it the most remarkable. She realized how long she had been staring at him, quickly turning her gaze toward Arthur. "Your brother is a friend of my husband's." Mr. Beaumont nodded, slow and deliberate. Yes, I believe Edward caused a quarrel between himself and your brother Adam when he kept your location secret after your marriage. Her elopement had surely been the talk of Brighton once it had been discovered. Eleanor had not known that Mr. Quinton had confided in anyone about the elopement. Had he told his confidants that it was a kidnapping? She had not realized that Mr. Quinton's friendship with Lord Ramsbury had run so deep. Mr. Quinton had demanded that she convince two of her own friends that she was happily eloping at Gretna Green, so as to give her family every reason to believe the truth of her letter that explained her happiness. She shook off the emotion that burned in her chest at the thought of the letter. She had read it over countless times, making corrections at Mr. Quinton's demand. She pictured the fresh parchment, the wax seal, and the dirt on the edges where she had creased it and unfolded it again and again. It was a letter filled with lies. Dear Papa, there is little I can say to you in the way of apology, for I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, nor do I ask for it. I also do not ask for your understanding, but only that you receive this missive and know that I am alive and I am happy. I write now as I ride to London, where I will marry Mr. William Quinton. I love Mr. Quinton, and I know he will bring me exceeding happiness. Knowing that you did not approve of him and would never endorse the match, I aspired to escape in secret. My reputation will be safe as well as the Claridge name, not to worry. Suspecting you or perhaps Adam may follow me to London, I was forced to keep my departure a secret, as was Mr. Quinton, until we had secured our marriage. I confided in but two trusted friends, Miss Darby and Miss Reed. Please do not blame them for fulfilling their promise of silence to me. Mr. Quinton confided in one man of the regiment and another man of his acquaintance. I shall think of you and Adam often. Please do not come searching for me, for I do not wish to return to Brighton. I regret the worry and unease I have caused you, and wish you all the best in your recovery to good health. I cannot give you the address in which I will receive your letters, but I will promise to write you upon occasion. With love and sincerity, Eleanor. I hope your brother does not still harbour any ill feelings toward my brother, Mr. Beaumont said, obstructing her thoughts. Although if he does, I do not blame him for it. Eleanor knew that her husband had not given Lord Ramsbury their true location, so it would not have helped even if he had told Adam the truth of where she was. After reading the letter she sent, Adam likely never came searching for her anyway. She could not help but feel that he hated her now. He believed that she had abandoned him and their father. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that she would soon be able to explain it all to him. I have not written to Adam in years, so I do not know his opinion of your brother. Eleanor realized the mistake of her words the moment she spoke them, the moment she saw the crease in Mr. Beaumont's brow. What has stopped you from writing? Postage was an expense we simply could not afford. Mr. Beaumont's brow tightened further. His voice remained soft but deeply inquisitive. Yet you could afford such a long journey by hired coach. She still feared she couldn't afford to pay Mr. Fifet. Shifting in her chair, she told yet another lie. Well, Mr. Quinton has been planning this trip for us for a long while and has set aside the needed funds. Mr. Beaumont nodded, though she suspected he was not entirely convinced. Was she truly so terrible a liar? I am glad you were able to take the trip, he said. Your brother will be very happy to see you after so long a time. Mr. Beaumont moved his gaze to Arthur before shifting his chair abruptly closer. She instinctively clutched Arthur's arm. Mr. Beaumont's gaze flicked to hers with concern. Her grip loosened. What was she thinking? Mr. Beaumont was not threatening. He would not hurt her or Arthur. She allowed her heartbeat to slow as Mr. Beaumont reached into his jacket, withdrawing a tiny seashell. He slowly extended his hand to Arthur, offering the shell to him.
When I was a young boy, I collected seashells. To this day, I cannot ignore a beautiful shell when I see it on the beach. I found this one this morning. Would you like to have it?"
Eleanor craned her neck to see Arthur's expression. He glanced at her for approval. She nodded toward the shell, smiling to give him courage. In one quick swipe, Arthur took the shell from Mr. Beaumont's palm.
He chuckled. "He is a shy one, isn't he?"
Eleanor laughed, but it came off weak. "He is, indeed." A few minutes later, a maid came in the drawing-room with several hot trays of food. Mr. Fiffet joined them at the card table in a set of dry clothing, where they sat down to dine. Mr. Beaumont smiled.
"I know this is a strange place to eat, but I did not wish to take you away from the warmth of the fire. I hope you find this arrangement comfortable enough."
"This is perfect, thank you." Eleanor's mouth watered at the aromas that wafted up from the silver platters. Fresh bread, butter, jam, and cheese were arranged on one tray, and the other held fruit and sliced ham. After arranging a plate for Arthur, she gathered food onto her own. As she ate, gratitude surged in her heart for the generosity of a near stranger.
"Do you live alone here?" the coachman asked Mr. Beaumont.
Eleanor had not thought to ask such a question. She had not seen any evidence of a wife or children, but she supposed they could be out visiting neighbours or in the nursery.
"Yes, it is just me," Mr. Beaumont said. "The neighbourhood is very kind to call on me often, so I am not forced to always be in solitude. I visit my family in Brighton as frequently as I am able."
Mr. Fiffet smiled. Eleanor watched with fascination as he managed to mix nearly every food item on the platter: grapes, jam, butter, ham, and cheese, placing it between two thick slices of bread. He took a large bite, chewing loudly. His eyebrows lifted in delight as he chewed.
"Certainly they would not hesitate to call on such a generous and kind acquaintance."
Mr. Fiffet's voice came out muffled, jam oozing out the corners of his mouth. Eleanor could see the fascination and slight revulsion in Mr. Beaumont's eyes as he watched the coachman eat his concoction, but he hid it well behind a friendly smile.
"My neighbours have been very welcoming, yes."
Before he had swallowed the first, Mr. Fiffet took a second bite. Mr. Beaumont's eyes widened ever so slightly. For a man of such a slight frame, Eleanor was thoroughly surprised that the coachman could eat so much. The coachman gave a slow nod as he took yet another bite, his words entirely intelligible.
"I am waffle."
Henry's eyes met Eleanor's briefly, a smile dancing in them. She pressed down her own smile, glancing at Arthur, who stared at the coachman with his own fascination. She hoped he would not begin to imitate Mr. Fiffet's dining manners.
"Pardon me?"
Mr. Beaumont asked. With one forceful swallow, the coachman cleared his throat.
"I imagine you receive many visitors just for the marvellous food you offer."
He licked his fingers before taking a swig from his goblet.
"It is quite marvellous indeed."
Mr. Beaumont grinned, a wide smile that Eleanor guessed he had been suppressing for several minutes.
"Even if that is their only reason for visiting, I am still happy to receive them. Better that than to be alone all of my days. I have lived here 4 years now."
"Why have you not married?" Eleanor was shocked by both the coachman's prodding questions and Henry's calm reaction to them.
"I hope to marry only for the most ardent love and affection. Such a thing is difficult to find."
Eleanor studied his face. Mr. Beaumont would be searching forever if he hoped to find such a thing. She did not know men had such ambitions as love. Mr. Quinton certainly hadn't.
"Indeed, very difficult."
The coachman chuckled, finishing the enormous portion of what remained on his tray in one bite. Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on Mr. Beaumont's face as he smiled again. He tipped his chin downward, as if hoping to hide the expression in the folds of his cravat. Mr. Fiffet turned toward Eleanor. "I'm afraid my schedule will not allow for a long delay. We must be on the road again as soon as possible."
Eleanor nodded, catching Mr. Beaumont's gaze. "Thank you very much for your hospitality." He watched her stand, rising as well.
"It was my pleasure, Mrs. Quinton."
She felt his gaze on her face for a long moment as she gathered Arthur into her arms. He was quite small for his age, so it was no trouble to carry him. She dreaded the day he became too heavy to carry. She feared letting him walk on his own feet and wander away from her side too often. Taking a deep breath, she cast Mr. Beaumont one last smile and nod before exiting through the drawing-room door. She hoped he hadn't suspected the truth of her situation. Had he been aware that she was lying?
"Oh, what a delicious meal that was,"
the coachman said as they walked back to the coach and stepped inside. With what remained of the drive to Brighton, Eleanor heard those words on multiple occasions, and many other variations of praise over Mr. Beaumont's meal. But all Eleanor could seem to recall of the event was Mr. Beaumont's kindness and striking blue eyes. Arthur turned his new seashell over in his hands repeatedly as the coach moved smoothly down the road toward Brighton. Chapter 3. The smell of Brighton was one Eleanor would always remember. She had lived near the sea all of her life, whether it was the sea on the northern tip of England or the sea on the southern. The Brighton coast was different. It smelled of salt and mist and a fresh cleanliness that reminded her of peace and belonging. No matter what Mr. Quinton had tried to convince her to believe, she did not leave Brighton willingly. She never would have, and she never would again. She stepped out of the carriage where it had stopped in front of her childhood home. She fumbled through her reticule, withdrawing the last of her coins. She approached Mr. Fiffet, opening her palm. Her heart pounded. Would it be enough? His eyes fell on the coins, and he shook his head.
"No, ma'am, Mr. Beaumont has already paid your way."
"Pardon me?" She must have heard him incorrectly.
"The cost of your journey has been paid in its entirety by Mr. Beaumont. He is a very generous man indeed."
Eleanor could scarcely believe it. What had she done to deserve such kindness? Mr. Beaumont did not know her. He did not owe her anything. How could she ever thank him? Hot tears burned behind her eyes, sending tightness down her throat. Her heart warmed, her opinion of Mr. Beaumont growing in positivity. She took Arthur's hand, looking up toward the house in front of them. Nothing had changed. The house appeared as it had the day she left. She stepped onto the neat grass. The joyful emotion that pulsed through her was suddenly overcome by fear. Would Adam still want her here? Would he resent her? Would he understand? In the 5 years that she had been apart from her brother, she had lost a sense of familiarity with his character. She remembered his devotion and generosity, but what if he had changed? She certainly had. Pushing aside her fear, she took one step, then another, closer to the front door. With a deep breath of fortitude, she struck the wood 3 times. The sound echoed through the air, pounding against her aching skull. Arthur squeezed her hand tighter as the door swung open. The same butler that had greeted her on many occasions as a child stood in the doorway. He too appeared very much the same, but slightly older. His eyes flashed with recognition as he took in her face. Before the stunned butler could utter a word, Eleanor cleared her throat. "Is Adam here?" she asked. He nodded, stepping aside for her to enter.
"He was on his way out for a ride with his wife, but I believe he is still in the nursery."
Eleanor felt another wave of grief. Wife? Nursery? Mr. Quinton had taken her away from her family for long enough to miss her brother's wedding?
The birth of his child? The emotion in her chest rose and fell in waves, growing stronger with each pulse. She wiped the perspiration from her palms on her skirts before picking Arthur up and propping him on her hip. The butler seemed to recover from his shock for long enough to speak. "What has brought you back to Brighton? Why are you here? The master is not expecting you." The disdain in his voice was heavy and direct. He, much like everyone in Brighton, still believed her departure to have been voluntary, selfish, and cruel. She swallowed, reminding herself that this disdain was something she would have to grow accustomed to. "I should think it is quite obvious that I have come to visit my brother." She cast the butler a quick glance before stepping forward with forced confidence. "Shall I wait for him in the drawing-room?" The butler nodded, a quick tip of his head. "I will inform him of your arrival." Eleanor thanked him before turning the corner to where she knew she would find the drawing-room. She took in the walls, the side tables in the entry, and the chandelier above, a wistful feeling pinching her heart. When she entered the drawing-room, she was surprised to find a woman sitting in a nearby chair. The moment the door opened, the woman turned around with a gasp, her blonde curls tight and bouncy as they framed her round, rosy face. "You nearly frightened me to death," she exclaimed, before fully taking in Eleanor's appearance. The moment the woman saw her, the playful expression of fear on her face slackened. "Oh, my apologies. I thought you were my niece, Amelia." Eleanor stared at her. The woman looked much too old to be Adam's wife. Her hand pressed against her chest as she gave a boisterous laugh. "I assure you, you did not truly frighten me to near death. I was only exaggerating, as I always do. It is one of my most renowned qualities." The woman's pale blue eyes danced as she spoke, giving life and youth to the wrinkles around her smile. "Does your niece live here?" Eleanor asked. The woman watched her carefully as she carried Arthur to the sofa. Eleanor sat down, studying the details of the room. It had been redecorated, a task she could likely credit Adam's wife for. "Why, yes, she does indeed. My niece is the mistress of this home, in fact." She grinned with pride before offering her own introduction. "My name is Margaret Buxton. I am visiting for the summer from Nottingham. I come as often as I am able to take the cure, you see. The healing qualities of the Brighton waters have served my leg quite nicely over the years." She tapped her cane that rested against the edge of her chair. "I hardly need this any longer." She beamed. "Forgive me, I am prattling on about things you do not care to hear." She tipped her head to the side. "I dare say I have not seen you here before." Eleanor hoped that Adam's wife was as instantly likeable as this woman. There was something about the woman's familiar and friendly disposition that gave instant ease to Eleanor's fear. "I have not been here in several years. I am Adam's sister, Eleanor. It is a pleasure to meet you." The woman gave a loud gasp, making both Eleanor and Arthur jump. "Oh! Ooh!" The woman stood up, fanning her face with one hand and holding her cane in the other, bustling around the room as if she did not know which direction to travel. She stopped in front of Eleanor, her eyes rounder than the saucers on the tea-table. "You are Eleanor!" "I am indeed." Eleanor couldn't prevent her own expression from mirroring the woman's surprise. "You have returned to Brighton?" "Yes." "Oh, Adam will be so very pleased." The woman's pacing had increased in rate, and Eleanor noticed a distinct limp to her gait. She paused by the pianoforte to rub her hip. "I am so very pleased to meet you." The woman smiled broadly. "We are practically family after all. I have known you all this time as Adam's sister Eleanor, the one who disappeared 5 years ago, the first summer I came to Brighton. How fortuitous that I was here visiting my niece when you decided to make your return. Oh, I do love a good dose of excitement and intrigue." She seemed to remember something very important, her bright blue eyes darting to the door. "I must fetch Adam straight away." She started toward the door, limping as she went. When she reached the door frame, she turned to Eleanor with a look that was somewhat stern, a sharp contrast to her previous joviality. "Stay there! Please do not run off again." Eleanor nodded, too shocked to speak. Margaret bustled out the door, muttering a string of excited and flustered words as she went. Arthur tipped his head up to look at Eleanor, his tiny lips pinched in a frown. Who was that? Eleanor had never met a more energetic woman above the age of 50 as this woman appeared to be. "That was our new friend." Arthur stared at the door, his brows contracting. Minutes later, the door swung open again. Adam stepped over the threshold, his dark hair neater than Eleanor remembered it, his eyes sharp and blue and filled with tears. "Eleanor?" She stood, leaving Arthur sitting on the sofa behind her. She hadn't expected the surge of emotion that gripped her in that moment, firm and unyielding. She met her brother in the middle of the room, falling into his outstretched arms. Tears stung and burned on her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Relief stronger than any she had ever felt washed over her in repetitive waves as Adam held her. She was finally home. She was finally safe. But her ruse was not over. She stepped back, taking a deep, collective breath. "Where have you been?" Adam asked, searching her face as if attempting to find the answer there before she could say it aloud. "I have been in Northumberland." "I searched for you in London. I could find no trace of you." Adam's brows were drawn together, a certain reservation in his expression. "Why did you never write? Why did you stay away for so long?" She had expected to be assailed with questions, so she had spent much of the drive to Brighton crafting the answers in her mind. She did not know why she felt the need to lie. She could trust Adam. What was she so afraid of? Still, the lies came pouring out. "I was grieving Papa's death on my own for so long, and I felt to speak to you would intensify my grief. When my son was born, I became quite busy. I suppose I became enamoured with my new life, and I forgot to keep myself tied to my old one." As heartless as the words sounded, she couldn't help but speak them. Adam glanced behind her to the sofa where Arthur sat quietly, watching the exchange with curiosity and a touch of worry. Eleanor stepped away from Adam, taking Arthur by the hand and guiding him toward Adam. "This is your Uncle Adam." She watched Arthur surveying Adam, distrust evident in his eyes. He glanced at Eleanor's face for reassurance. She had always been told that she and Adam had a clear resemblance. Both their eyes were blue with a similar shape, and both had the same black hair. She hoped the similarity would give Arthur ease. She straightened her posture, addressing her brother. "This is my son, Arthur." Adam smiled, leaning down for a closer look at him. "Good day, Arthur. It is a pleasure to meet you. I have a little girl of my own that must be very near to your age. She is your cousin." Adam met Eleanor's eyes. "Her name is Eleanor." Eleanor's heart jumped, guilt flooding through her veins. She had to remind herself once again that it had not been her choice to leave. Yes, she had been foolish for trusting Mr. Quinton, but it was not her fault that she deserted her family, leading them to believe they would never see her again. She hated that it had caused such pain to Adam. "I'm sorry, Adam," she whispered. "I should never have left." He stared at her, a look that was part awe and part frustration. "Why did you take so long to come visit? You might have at least told me where you were so I could visit you." His jaw tightened. "Or did your husband prevent it?" Her skin bristled, her tightly locked secrets begging to be unveiled. She opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. What was she afraid of? Mr. Quinton was dead. She could tell Adam he was dead without telling him what happened the day she left. She could keep some secrets. My husband died. When? Just before I came here. Adam did not appear surprised to find little emotion in Eleanor's voice or expression. She could not force herself to act as if she grieved the man. Did he leave you with a jointure? Any property? She shook her head. I left very soon after his death, so I have not been informed. But it would be my instant assumption that no, he did not. I would be quite surprised to learn that he left me with anything. Standing beside her brother in the safe comfort of her home, she could not help but unleash at least one of her secrets. I am certain he never cared for me, she whispered. Adam's breathing grew quick, as if anger were pushing it out from his lungs. What happened? I never entirely believed your letter. I couldn't believe that you would leave us with father so ill. I never thought you capable of leaving at all, risking your reputation and our families for a man that father did not approve of. You loved father, didn't you? Yes, she whispered. Very much. Behind Adam's shoulder, Margaret and a younger woman slipped into the room. Adam turned at the sound of the door, ushering the young woman forward. Only when she reached his side did Eleanor see the little girl walking beside her, dressed in a pale pink dress, her light brown hair falling straight and long for a girl so young. She stared up at Eleanor with round, coffee-coloured eyes. Adam took the woman's hand. Eleanor, this is my wife, Amelia, and our daughter. We call her Ella. Eleanor met the woman's intelligent brown eyes, smiling as much as she was able. The woman surveyed her in quick glances. Her face had a friendly warmth that could not be taught, a disposition similar to her aunt's. Underneath it, however, was the same curiosity and confusion that Eleanor had seen in every expression she had encountered, especially Mr. Beaumont's. Amelia took Eleanor's hands. I cannot believe you are here. Her voice carried a friendliness that matched her face. I look forward to coming to know you, for I've heard such wonderful things from my husband. Did Adam truly speak highly of her? How could he, after what he believed she had done? I did not know my brother married while I was away, Eleanor said, offering a smile. I am so happy to meet you. Eleanor felt an instant connection with the woman and suspected they would become very dear friends. She hoped Arthur and his little cousin could become friends too. Arthur hadn't had the opportunity to spend time in the company of other young children. She glanced down at him. He watched little Ella with trepidation, holding fast to Eleanor's hand. She introduced him to Amelia and Ella, who both seemed quite pleased to make his acquaintance. He is positively adorable, Amelia said. Adam touched Eleanor's shoulder, calling her attention back to him. Please tell me what happened. Tell me the truth. At the reminder of his earlier question, her stomach flipped. I have already told you. I wish for the truth, Eleanor. I have been searching for it, for you, for 5 years now. I deserve to know. Amelia nudged Adam's arm, giving him a look that was a gentle rebuke. Eleanor has travelled far. We are all quite curious, but she and little Arthur must be quite fatigued and hungry. Eleanor shook her head. We just ate and rested in Worthing an hour ago. Do you know a Mr. Henry Beaumont? He offered us a few minutes to rest and eat on our journey. He was very kind. Adam's jaw clenched yet again, and a look of pure vexation crossed his features. Yes, I know the Beaumonts. I am not well acquainted with Henry, but I know his brother to be less than agreeable. He knew of your location and kept it from us.
Even so, he must have given us the wrong location. I was never able to find you in London."
She debated again over whether or not she should tell her brother the truth in its entirety. What harm could it do? He was the only person she knew with certainty that she could trust, and her trust was not easily won. "I am told that Lord Ramsbury has changed a great deal in recent years."
"Did Mr. Henry Beaumont tell you this?" Adam asked, his eyebrows rising. "What has given you the idea that you can believe a word he says? Of course he would defend his brother."
"He was very kind."
"Kindness and charm are often a ruse meant to lure in the most naive. Is that what your husband did?"
Amelia stepped forward. "Adam." He rubbed a hand over his hair, taking Eleanor's hand with a long exhale.
"Forgive me. I am simply overwhelmed. There is no need to discuss the Beaumonts and my rather strong opinions of them."
He gave a strained smile.
"I am happy to have you home. We have many items of greater importance to discuss. I will have a room prepared for you immediately and make a place in the nursery for Arthur. Ella will be happy to have a new friend."
"I'll take the orders to the maid," Margaret piped in from her place near the door. She hobbled out into the hallway, and Eleanor could hear her loud, boisterous requests echoing through the halls. "Are you certain you have room for Arthur and me?" She had not known that Adam had a family and another guest staying. The house was not large, and she hated to be a burden. But she had nowhere else to go.
"Yes, of course. You are always welcome here."
Adam gestured for Eleanor to sit. He and Amelia took a seat in 2 chairs across from her. Ella sat on Amelia's lap, and Arthur sat on Eleanor's. Adam took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Eleanor's face. She had forgotten how much he looked like their father. It filled her with a pang of sorrow.
"I will begin with the first and most pressing question I have," Adam said. "Where have you been these last 5 years?"
Although her brother's voice was gentle, it still struck her hard. Why was it so difficult to be honest with her own family? She had grown so accustomed to lying, pretending she loved Mr. Quinton to avoid his punishments and anger, pretending to be happy and comfortable in her home and in the company of her few neighbours. "I have been in Northumberland, and that is the truth." Adam sat back, exchanging a look with Amelia.
"That is something we guessed, but could not justify spending the money it would require to go there in search of you. We very well could have been wrong. We could find no trace of Mr. Quinton's location. He abandoned the regiment, and none of his friends knew where he went."
Eleanor blinked. "You did not believe the words in my letter?"
"At first we did, but the more I pondered over it, nothing seemed to make sense. Your abrupt departure did not align with your character."
Amelia peeked around her daughter's shoulder. "I had not yet had the privilege of meeting you, so all I learned of your character was through Adam's words. I did not believe any woman of sense would leave the side of her dying father, especially when the man she intended to elope with was a man her father did not approve of. That is what ultimately led me to suspect something was amiss." Something was indeed amiss, then and now. Eleanor wrung her hands together. "Thank you for searching for me. I didn't know I was so greatly missed." Adam looked equal parts joyous and angry.
"I missed you more than you know. Please tell me everything, Eleanor. You know you can trust me."
She gathered her strength, deciding the best course of action would be to tell Adam and Amelia of her plight, from the very beginning up until the day she fled. There was one detail she had banished from her mind, one that she could never speak aloud if she hoped to keep Arthur safe. "I loved Mr. Quinton," she began, "or I was quite certain that I did. He flattered me, he gave me gifts, kind words, generosity. He made me feel more important than I had ever felt in my life. I see now that it was all a trick. Through a member of his regiment, he learned of the dowry that was given to me through our uncle. Adam sat up straighter.
You had a dowry?
No one knew of it besides Papa. He intended to keep it secret. £15,000 would draw in the greediest of men, Papa said. He advised me to keep it a secret, and I tried. But Mr. Quinton discovered it. I thought I could trust him. Adam seemed to guess at the rest, his face hardening. We had planned to elope. I knew Papa did not approve of Mr. Quinton, but I still wished to marry him. I thought I loved him. I was certain that I could come visit often after our marriage. Before we could carry it out, I learned that Mr. Quinton was only interested in my dowry, and I was heartbroken. I declared that I would never marry him. But before I could escape, he forcibly took me to Gretna Green. He threatened to come back to Brighton and hurt you and Papa if I did not marry him. I did not know what to do. She shook her head, her stomach swimming with nausea at the memory. We were married before the day was over. She tried to pause, but the words continued pouring out of her. Through the last 5 years, he has gambled nearly all of my dowry away. When he died, Arthur and I finally had our opportunity to escape. Adam's chest rose and fell with a heavy breath. Amelia's eyes shone with tears. She rushed forward to sit beside Eleanor on the sofa, touching her knee gently. I am so sorry you were forced to endure such things. I cannot imagine the fear and loneliness you must have felt. You poor thing.
If he were still alive, I might have killed him myself, Adam grumbled, coming to stand beside Eleanor as well. He sat against the edge of the sofa, taking her hand. You are home now. You are safe. I should have tried harder to find you. I should not have given up.
There is no way you could have known. Mr. Quinton fooled everyone.
Not Papa. Adam's voice hardened. Do you suppose Lord Ramsbury knew?
Amelia met his eyes for a long moment before she shook her head. When I saw him and his wife recently, I thought him to be a changed man. If he knew anything else, he would have confessed it to us by now. I am sure of it.
I am not sure of it, Adam said. I will go to his home tomorrow and ask him.
That is not necessary, Amelia said, shaking her head. Adam did not appear intent to drop the idea. He didn't speak of it further, but he seemed to tuck the idea away for later discussion.
Are you certain Mr. Quinton did not leave you a jointure?
Eleanor sighed. Yes.
As I understand it, the common law would entitle you to 1/3 of his properties at least, even without a premarital contract. But we will need to speak with a man more familiar with the law to affirm such details. I will take care of you and Arthur regardless of the result of such discussion. But I do wish for you to reap all that you can in the way of money and property from such a miserable marriage. You deserve it.
Eleanor nodded, relief pouring through her at her brother's kindness. He would not turn her away. She had been foolish to think he would. But she still had not mentioned the issue that was the most pressing, the elder Mr. Quinton. It was an irrational fear. He would not find her in Brighton. He would not have any way to prove what she had done, and he would not take Arthur from her. She repeated the reassurances to her heart over and over, until she started to believe them. Chapter 4. There was something about a quiet house that led the mind to think of ridiculous scenarios. Henry Beaumont shook off the thought for what felt like the 100th time. No, Mrs. Quinton had not been lying to him. What reason could she have to lie? He had mistaken her fearful expression and shifting eyes, hadn't he? Henry put his face in his hands as he sat at his dining-room table. Growing up in a home with a father, mother, elder brother, elder sister, and younger sister, he was still not accustomed to the eerie silence of hearing just one fork scraping across a glass dish at dinner, his own. He picked up his goblet and took a swig, trying, once again, not to think about the meal he had shared the day before with Mrs. Quinton and her coachman. He had been reflecting and dwelling on it for the last 24 hours, instead of performing the duties of managing his estate that he ought to have been focusing on. Regardless of whether or not Mrs. Quinton was telling him the truth about all things, he knew that she had lied about at least one thing. Her husband was not alive and well and sending her and her son off on a trip to Brighton. He was dead. There were definite benefits to being the brother of one of the most influential peers in the county. His brother, Edward, never missed a piece of news or gossip, having connections to all circles of society and being admired and respected by all. Edward had many friends that knew of Mr. Quinton's death and had been informed of it soon after it occurred. It had occurred, Henry learned, just over 1 week ago. Edward had stopped by earlier that day on a ride with his wife, and upon Henry's mention of Mrs. Quinton's visit, Edward had broken the news. Needless to say, Henry's confusion had then doubled. He pushed away from the table, wiping his mouth with a napkin. It wasn't mere curiosity that made him eager to speak with Mrs. Quinton again. He wished to discover the truth because he worried over her. He had never seen such a fearful expression, such a permanent one, upon any face. He did not like it, and he knew that it certainly did not belong there. If there was any way he could help her and her son, he needed to find a way to do it. The most effective way of finding the answers he sought would be to go directly to the source. One might suspect the source to be Mrs. Quinton herself, but Henry knew that his brother was often the best source of information in all of Brighton. He had connections Henry could only dream of. The only connection Henry had was to Edward, which was a beneficial connection indeed. Henry set out for Brighton around 2 o'clock, arriving at Edward's home within the hour. He dismounted from his Arabian, knocking on the front door. He found Edward in his study, sorting through his ledger. Edward glanced up, the blue of his eyes sparkling with surprise.
"Did you miss me already? Lud, brother, you need to find a wife."
Edward gathered a stack of papers into his hands and rapped it against the table, straightening out the corners. A blonde curl fell over his forehead, adding to the devil-may-care appearance his brother flaunted. Though Henry shared the same blue eyes and blonde hair, he was fairly certain his eyes had never sparked with mischief, and he preferred to keep his hair neat and as far from devilish as possible. Edward had always teased Henry, saying that if he did not have any inheritance, then he ought to become a vicar for his profession. There were times Henry wished for the life of a vicar, rather than the life of solitude he lived, managing his Worthing estate and the farms attached to it.
"I am still quite confused over my conversation with Mrs. Quinton," Henry said. "I hoped you could offer a bit of enlightenment," Henry said, pulling a chair closer to Edward's desk and sitting down. "You have been treating me as much more intelligent than I truly am of late." "You have become more intelligent since you married Grace. She has taught you well."
Edward chuckled.
"See, once again I affirm my point. You need to find a wife, and then you will not have to consult me with all your curiosities. You will find that a wife is a much better adviser than I will ever be."
Henry refrained from rolling his eyes.
"I have given you plenty of worthy advice in your life. I am not looking for advice from you. I thought you may have information that could help me. Mrs. Quinton lied about her husband being alive, and I cannot seem to stop wondering why." You always were a curious one, weren't you? Edward laughed under his breath as he set down the stack of papers, leaning his elbows on the table to give Henry his full attention. I am worried for her. Returning to Brighton after her mysterious departure 5 years ago is going to hurt her reputation. I do not understand why she lied about her husband's death. What reason could she have for that? Perhaps she knew she would never see you again, and decided to spare herself a thorough questioning about the method of her husband's demise. I am not so insensitive as that. No, indeed, I am quite certain you are the most sensitive man of my acquaintance. Henry smiled, unable to help it. And you are the most intolerable. When my wife calls me intolerable, she means it as a compliment. Henry chuckled. Grace and I have never been more different. Edward laughed before his expression grew slightly more serious. Yes, I admit that when you told me of your conversation with Mrs. Quinton, I was quite curious myself. Her husband was a friend of mine, and I was surprised at the time to hear of his intentions of marrying Eleanor. He did not seem the sort of man to marry at all, unless it was for advantage. Eleanor did not have any dowry that I knew of, so I assumed it was for love. It was an elopement, as you know, and I was asked to keep it a secret until they could carry it out and move to London. I honoured my friend's request, but I must admit the entire situation felt rather strange. It was out of Mr. Quinton's character, and, as I understand it, out of Eleanor's character as well. Henry tapped the oak desk with his fingertips. Do you suppose Mr. Quinton was not the good man you thought he was? You did not see Mrs. Quinton that day. She did not appear to be on a joyful holiday. She appeared to be fleeing, running, hiding. I cannot explain it. And then her son, he appeared afraid of everything and everyone. That does not simply happen to a child unless it is caused by something. What sort of a man was your friend, Mr. Quinton? Edward shook his head slowly. I am no longer certain. He rubbed his jaw, an idea hovering clearly on the surface of his expression. What is it? Henry asked. Edward sighed. I doubt I will be welcome, but we could pay a visit to Adam Claridge's residence and seek our answers there. Or we could simply keep our noses out of business that is not our own. It has become our business, Edward. You must take responsibility for the part you played with aiding Mr. Quinton in his secret elopement. And I wish to help Mrs. Quinton in any way I can. Henry fixed his gaze on his brother, begging him with his eyes. If I could have half the heart and goodness that you have, Henry. Edward shook his head, a slow smile pulling on his lips. You simply cannot be swayed from the honourable, can you? I'm afraid I cannot, but you were swayed from the dishonourable once. And I intend to never go back, Edward grinned. So I'm afraid that means I must help you. I'm afraid it does. Edward stood, stretching his back and clasping Henry's hand in a firm shake. Do you suppose the Claridges will receive visitors within the afternoon? They may receive visitors, but I do not know if they will receive you as one of them. Edward rubbed his forehead. Adam does despise me. Amelia seems to have no quarrel with me. Perhaps she will convince him to receive our calling card with some measure of decorum. I will see if Grace wishes to accompany us. Amelia is sure to happily receive her. They walked out to the hall, and Edward called for a servant to deliver their card to the Claridge residence, informing them of their pending arrival. Shortly after, they gathered their hats, Edward a beaver and Henry a top hat.
Grace left their young son Oliver with the nanny, and the three of them set off for the Claridge residence. As they rode, Henry tried to plan what he would say. It was common practice to inquire after the safe arrival of Mrs. Quinton, her son, and their health after enduring such a wet storm on their journey. After that, he would simply see where the conversation led, and what he could decipher from her words, whether she spoke truth or whether she continued with her lies. The ride took less than 20 minutes by coach, and Henry led the way to the front door. They were let inside and directed to the parlour. The well-decorated room was filled with more company than Henry had expected. He was not well acquainted with the Claridges, but he clearly recognised Adam and his wife. An older woman sat beside them, a cane resting against her knee. The woman glanced up at Edward with a sour expression before standing and offering the customary bow of her head. Edward nodded in return, greeting Adam and Amelia with nods in the same fashion. Henry greeted the party, pleased to see that the greetings he received in return were less sour than those Edward had received. They must have still believed him to be partially responsible for what happened to Mrs. Quinton, whatever that might have been. Henry's eyes swept over the room again, and he found Mrs. Quinton and Arthur sitting in the far right corner, quiet and small, blending into the dark wallpaper behind them with their black hair. Henry offered a small smile to the little boy when he met his eyes, but the child glanced away quickly. Mrs. Quinton seemed to watch Henry's every step as he came further into the room. The room fell into silence for several seconds as they sat down. Adam's gaze was fixed firmly on Edward, and Henry had the distinct impression that the focus of this meeting would quickly come to be on Adam and Edward's quarrel. He hoped it could be resolved with enough time to discover more about Mrs. Quinton. He glanced at her, meeting her eyes quickly before she darted them away. She stared at her hands in her lap.
"What has brought you here?" Adam asked, his deep voice breaking the silence.
Edward crossed his ankle over his knee.
"It is my brother's errand that we are on. I am merely accompanying him."
He turned to Henry. Henry smiled, hoping to convey all his good intentions in one look.
"Yes, as Mrs. Quinton may have told you, I met her and her son along their journey here. The weather was quite severe, and I hope to inquire after their health after being outside in such a storm."
When he finished speaking, he turned to Mrs. Quinton in the corner. She cleared her throat, the piercing blue of her eyes just as intense as her brother's, but without the malice. "We are quite well, Mr. Beaumont. I thank you for your concern. I give great credit to the hospitality you offered for the sustained health of myself and my son." She gave the slightest of smiles before her expression fell back into the fearful one he had seen the day before. It was as if she could give no other expression unless it was with great effort, such as the smile she had just forced onto her lips. He studied her downcast eyes and shifting fingers. Was she nervous because she knew she had lied to him? Did she now realize he had caught her in the lie? He did not wish to add to her fear. He simply wanted to discover the reason behind it. He would have to be gentle about the way he brought it into the conversation. As he sorted through the options in his mind, he heard Edward's voice.
"I was very sorry to hear of your husband's death, Mrs. Quinton. Please accept my condolences."
Mrs. Quinton's complexion grew paler, her hands fidgeting faster over her skirts. Her son sat beside her, and she pulled him onto her lap, as if to hide behind him. Her eyes flicked to Henry's so quickly he wondered if they had at all. She had been caught in her lie. Henry shot Edward a berating glance, to which he simply winked, a motion so subtle that only the receiver would have noticed. He had clearly made Mrs. Quinton uncomfortable. Edward's wife, Grace, sitting on Edward's other side, cast him a berating look of her own. Henry guessed that when Edward turned his head, he threw her a similar wink, or perhaps one with a bit more flirtation. It took Henry a moment to take advantage of the door his brother had left open for him. He cleared his throat.
"I did not know you were widowed, Mrs. Quinton."
The centres of her cheeks reddened, and he felt a pang of guilt for prying her secrets out of her. Secrets were often kept for a reason. "It was not something I wished to speak about." Her voice came out close to a whisper.
"I understand."
Though Henry was far from understanding.
"I am very sorry for your loss."
She nodded. Why was it that she did not appear sorry to have lost her husband? Adam's voice cut through the air.
"It has come to our attention that Mr. Quinton was not the sort of husband that my sister deserved. He was not a respectable man."
He turned to Edward.
"Is this something you were aware of, my lord, when you kept his abduction of my sister a secret?"
Henry watched as Edward's face blanched. He was not one to become easily uncollected.
"Abduction?"
"Yes, she did not marry him willingly, and they were not living in London. He was keeping her in the north, prohibiting her to visit her family in Brighton." Edward exchanged a glance with Henry.
"I did not know of this, upon my word."
Adam eyed him with suspicion, but remained silent. Awkwardness filled the air, pulsing with more vigour than Henry's heartbeat. Mrs. Quinton had been abducted. That would explain her constant fear. What had he been thinking coming here? It was obvious that he and Edward were not welcome, especially Edward.
"Mrs. Quinton, was the rest of your journey, comfortable?"
Henry asked, before he could think of a better question to break the silence. "It was quite comfortable." She blinked, as if shocked at his level of stupidity for repeating himself.
"The weather was satisfactory?"
"Yes, it was." Henry heard a choked sound come from beside him, knowing it to be Edward's laugh, suppressed behind his tight-lipped smile. Henry lacked the social charm in conversing that his brother had perfected, and it was never more obvious than in a moment like this.
"Forgive us for calling upon you at such a time," Henry said. "I presume you are eager to continue speaking with your family, alone. If you need anything at all, I am happy to help you. I will help you in any way I can."
Grace had been engaged in a quiet conversation with Amelia, one that Henry had not noticed until Grace cleared her throat loudly, calling both Edward's and Henry's attention. "We mustn't leave yet," she said. "Yes, please stay," Amelia said. She turned to Adam, placing her hand on his knee. "Grace has just informed me of a connection she has with Mr. William Harrison, her brother-in-law, a respected barrister living here in Brighton." Adam's expression lightened for a moment. "She is certain he will be able to assist us in the intricacies of Eleanor's financial dealings, as well as her continued custody of Arthur." Adam nodded slowly.
"I would love to speak with Mr. Harrison."
"I will ensure he calls upon you this week," Grace said, smiling brightly. Her dark eyes mirrored the enthusiasm in Amelia's, each woman trying to alleviate the tension between their husbands. Henry's eyes wandered over to Eleanor and Arthur, secluded in the corner. Why did she do that? Would she not wish to be near her family after being apart from them for so long? She still appeared nervous, as if she were hiding even from them. He could not explain the draw he felt to her. He shook the feeling from his shoulders, returning his attention to the conversation beside him. The group arranged to have a meeting with Mr. Harrison at the earliest convenience for the barrister, and he and Edward and Grace were soon on their way. Henry's brother turned to him as they stepped out the front door, waiting for the butler to close it behind them before speaking.
"You might have made a greater effort to make our visit more awkward." Forgive me, but I could not think clearly amid the clear contention between Adam and yourself.
Henry took a deep breath, rubbing one side of his face.
There is no sense in holding ill feelings toward another person. It will do nothing but hurt you. I always knew you should have been a vicar, Edward mumbled, earning a well-timed jab from his wife's elbow.
There is always something to be learned from Henry, Grace said, her dark eyes inquisitive as they glanced across her husband, settling on Henry's face. I have always wondered how the two of you were born of the same parents. You are as opposite as two brothers could be, at least in the way of character.
We have been mistaken as twin brothers before, Henry said.
Grace laughed softly. Yes, but I'm certain the very moment someone acquaints themselves with your distinct personalities, they would immediately contradict themselves.
Do you mean to say that I'm not saintly enough to be a vicar?
Edward asked, mock offence gleaming in his eyes. Grace refused to answer, bursting into laughter. Henry smiled at the ground as they crossed over the neat lawn and returned to the carriage. But his smile quickly faded when he remembered Mrs. Quinton and her fearful expression. There was something wrong with the entire situation, and he would not rest until he discovered how he could aid in mending it. For the first time since he moved to Worthing, he felt he had a purpose. Chapter 5. The very moment she heard the front door click shut, Eleanor released a long breath, her shoulders relaxing. Why must Mr. Beaumont look at her in that way? She had never felt so scrutinized in her entire life. Yet she could not blame him for it. She had lied to him about her husband's death, and he knew it. She had spoken without thinking. She hadn't thought she would ever see Mr. Beaumont again, at least not until after she had established herself in Brighton and secured her safety from the elder Mr. Quinton. The entire time, the very short time, that Mr. Beaumont and Lord and Lady Coventry had been there, she had felt vastly uncomfortable. Even now that they were gone, Adam and Amelia watched her with growing concern. Adam tipped his head to one side, studying her with intensity.
Why did you tell Mr. Beaumont that your husband was still alive?
I did not wish to speak of it with a near stranger. Adam nodded. He seemed intent to refrain from pressing her with more questions. She could see a battle in his eyes, even from her place across the room. His curiosity won out.
Did you ever say how Mr. Quinton died?
Her muscles clenched. I did not. She licked her lips. It was unexpected. I returned home one day and found him dead. I do not know what happened. That was when I fled with Arthur. Adam glanced at his wife, who sat a little closer to the edge of her seat.
Have you not worked with a solicitor to settle the estate?
I did not have the time.
Why not? With your husband dead, what reason could you have had to flee so quickly?
She felt the familiar sensation of fear creeping over her skin and scratching icy fingers over her shoulder blades. His father. He lived nearby. He was rather obsessed with his grandson, with Arthur, and often insisted on teaching him, taking him on trips to town. I do not trust him, so I often avoided it, but I could not always. I'm afraid that he may be intent to find us again. I was afraid he would take Arthur if we did not leave quickly. Eleanor blinked, resisting the burning in her eyes. I am certain he will find us. I do not know when, but I know he will. He knew the address of this home. I do not know what to do. She held Arthur's hand, keeping her voice low. Amelia's brows had fallen, her face sullen. Aunt Margaret, will you please take little Arthur and Ella to the nursery to play? She glanced at Eleanor. If you approve. Eleanor nodded, setting Arthur on the floor. He glanced back at her, his eyes flashing with uncertainty, as Margaret took his hand. Go on, I will see you very soon. Arthur followed quietly as Margaret and Ella left the room. Adam rubbed his jaw, unrest evident in his features.
I am not familiar enough with law to say for certain, but your husband's father should not be permitted custody of the child.
Certainty is what I'm desperately lacking at the moment.
Our meeting with the barrister should be able to provide it.
Adam stood, placing his hands on his hips.
But what you need now is a distraction. We shall find solutions to your problems then. For now, you are going into town with Amelia.
Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window. She could barely glimpse the sea from their angle, with its gently pulsing waves and pebbled shore, but that was where she wanted to go. She had only seen the unsettled grey sea of the north for so many years. She wanted her Brighton sea again.